For quiz 2 for Math 111, we're given this function f of x, it's equal to x squared plus 3x plus 5, and asked to find first f of a. Kind of trivial. I mean, almost seems like a trick question because there's not a whole lot to do. All this is saying is that if you put x into this machine, x squared plus 3x plus 5 would come out. So if you put a into this machine, all the x's are just going to change to a, so it's going to be a squared plus 3a plus 5. So that's really all there is to it. All you're doing is changing all the x's into a's. It gets a little bit more interesting down here when you're trying to figure out f of a plus h. So what you got to do for f of a plus h is you're changing each x into an a plus h. So what used to be x squared is now this entire thing a plus h squared. And what used to be 3x is now 3 times this entire thing a plus h. Then we got the plus 5. It wants me to simplify it. So I should expand this out and get a squared plus 2ah plus h squared plus 3a plus 3h plus 5. Actually, I guess you could argue that's not any simpler. I didn't really do anything. So maybe I'm just going to say find here. Because I don't really care if you leave it like this or like this. So sure, whatever. So what I'm going to say is this is the answer to part A of number 1. And then for part B, you can either do this or you can do this. However, I think what you'll find is that if you leave your answer as this for part B, in part C, you're going to have to change it into this anyways. So let's go ahead and do that. Part C is asking me to simplify this mess, which just looks like a bunch of symbols right now. It'll turn out that this has a really important meaning in calculus. This is what's called the difference quotient. But for now, it's just a bunch of symbols. F of a plus h, I figured out that that was a squared plus 2ah plus h squared plus 3a plus 3h plus 5. All right, that's what f of a plus h is, all this mess. And from that, I want to subtract whatever f of a is, which I figured out up here was a squared plus 3a plus 5. And then I want that to be divided by h. And now it's important that I leave this simplify here because I don't want you to leave it like this. I want you to go further. A squared plus 2ah plus h squared plus 3a plus 3h plus 5 minus a squared minus 3a minus 5. I want to subtract all this stuff. The most common mistake people make on these problems is not distributing the negative to all three terms, just making it minus a squared plus 3a. You don't want to do that. You got to make them all minus. And now if we combine like terms, I got an a squared here and an a squared there. So this and that cancel out. I got a 3a here and a negative 3a here. I got a 5 here and a negative 5 here. So what I'm left with is just, well, there's an h squared. There's a 2ah. I got that one, got that one. There's a 3h. And it looks like that's it. That's all divided by h. Done? Almost. These guys have a greatest common factor of h. So you can pull out that h, and it leaves you with h plus 2a plus 3 divided by h. And now this h and this h cancel. So what we get for our final answer is down here, h plus 2a plus 3. That, I understand, has no meaning to you. It's just symbols that we pushed around on a piece of paper. This is very important in calculus. This is a step away from figuring out the derivative of this function. But right now that doesn't make any sense. Right now we're just doing the algebra behind the steps that we'll later do in calculus. But this is the answer. All right, whew, long quiz because we still have another problem. Gives me this mess. Fortunately, at least I said do it 2 of these 3 ways. So you can choose two of your favorite out of these three. If we're going to do this by factoring, what we want to do is find two numbers that multiply to a times c, so in this case 12. 4 times 3 is 12. And that add to b, which is 8. And the numbers that do that are positive 2 and positive 6. 2 plus 6 is 8. 2 times 6 is 12. So what we do is we rewrite this thing as 4x squared plus 2x plus 6x plus 3. In other words, you replace 8x with 2x and 6x, like we did over here. And the reason you do that, you haven't factored yet. I guess I should say this equals 0. You haven't factored, but now that you have 4 terms, we can factor by grouping. From these first two terms, 4x squared plus 2x, we can factor out a 2x. If you factor out a 2x, you're left with 2x plus 1, 2x from here, 1 from here. And now our goal is to factor something out from this so that we'll be left with 2x plus 1. And the answer to that something is positive 1. Or sorry, positive 3. Factor out a positive 3 and you'll be left with 2x plus 1. And now I have two terms that both have a 2x plus 1 in them. So I can factor out that 2x plus 1, and what I'm left with is 2x plus 3. So what that tells me is that 2x plus 1 equals 0, 2x equals negative 1, x equals negative 1/2, or 2x plus 3 equals 0, 2x equals negative 3, x equals negative 3/2. So my answers are this guy and this guy. Man, this is going to be easy to run out of room. Okay, by completing the square, 4x squared plus 8x plus 3 equals 0. Let's first make our leading coefficient a 1, divide both sides by 4. X squared plus 2x plus 3/4 equals 0. Then let's find something that I can add to both sides of the equation. We can put it here and here so that this becomes a perfect square. What that something is positive 1. The reason it's positive 1 is either because half of this coefficient is 1 and 1 squared is 1, or because to get a perfect square over here I'd need a 1. X squared plus 2x plus 1 is just x plus 1 squared. And so what I have is x plus 1 squared plus 3/4 is equal to 1. Subtract 3/4 from both sides, and I have x plus 1 squared is equal to 1/4. So x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1/4. Sure, let's jump up here again. So x plus 1 is equal to plus or minus 1/2, which is the square root of 1/4. So x is negative 1 plus or minus 1/2. So x is negative 1 minus 1/2 is negative 3/2. Negative 1 plus 1/2 is negative 1/2. So x is either negative 3/2 or negative 1/2, matches up with what we got there. Should probably switch colors. These are all kind of blending into each other. So for the last one, the quadratic equation, we'll do it in red. Okay, quadratic equation, what you need for this is kind of some memorization. It says that the solutions to ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 are x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So in this specific problem, my value for a is 4, the coefficient on the x squared term. My value for b is 8, coefficient on the x term. And my value for c is 3. So what I got to do is plug all those in. It says that x is equal to negative b, negative 8, plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 64, minus 4 times 3. Okay, 4 times 4 is, man, that's going to suck. 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 4 is 48. And that's all divided by 2a, which is 2 times 4, which is 8. Okay, negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 48 is 16. So all I have to do is simplify these guys. Let's see, square root of 6. Okay, one more step. X equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 16 is 4 over 8. And now I can say, all right, negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4 over 8, which is negative 1/2. Or negative 8 minus 4 is negative 12 over 8, which is negative 3/2. This way is kind of a pain without a calculator. You got to do a lot of math in your head. But it's probably the easiest otherwise. But since we're not using calculators, maybe it's beneficial to learn A and B. But as long as you can do 2 of these 3, I'm pretty happy. So I guess that is the end of this quiz.